Hi, friends. Welcome to Digging Deep, a podcast brought to you by Motivo, where we unearth stories that bring us closer. I'm Rachel, joined by Dr. Carla, and together we are going to explore our shared experiences and what it means to be human.
We'll have conversations with clinicians, activists, and everyday heroes who share their wisdom. These discussions challenge our perspectives and ignite a spark for positive change. We'll explore love, loss, resilience, growth, and the power of human connection.
And we'll do so with humility, knowing that we are not the experts, but simply fellow explorers seeking to learn alongside you.
Digging Deep is more than a podcast. It's a community. Let's learn, grow, and support one another. So grab a cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and let's explore the heart of being human. Welcome to Digging Deep.
Hi.
Hi.
We're back.
So excited to be back.
No, I am too. I missed this last week. We didn't do it last week. Do you mind if I share why?
Of course. I think it's yours to share.
Oh, yes. COVID got me. We were together, you and I were together in Seattle for a little leadership retreat for Motivo with Mike, my co-founder, CTO, and then our Senior Vice President of Business Operations, Allie. I got there. I went to the store and got so much like cheese and charcuterie.
It was beautiful.
I was ready. I was ready for several days of like deep dive into like business strategy and Motivo and all the things. And then here comes along a positive test for COVID.
Yes. And we were in Seattle and, this was my first time being in Seattle. So I did have slight expectations that we were going to go see like Seattle things. Mike had told us, who lives in Seattle, that, the weather was beautiful and we were coming at like the perfect time. So everything was set for it to be great.
Yeah. It was going to be so wonderful, like not rainy. And,
Right.
Lauren was like a little bummed that I went to Seattle because I won't go into the full story, but that's where we fell in love for the first time as friends that became more than friends when we took a trip to Seattle when we were in college. And he was like, I can't, cope with the fact that you're in Seattle for the first time since that happened 20 years ago. I'm pretending you're in Alabama. And truly, we could have been in Alabama. I would have not known any different. I did not leave the couch. It was awful.
Yes. It was not what we expected. I'm sure awful for you because
Yes.
COVID is awful. So yeah, but we were together and we had plans to record our first Digging Deep in person in the same room. And we could not do that, which, makes sense. You had COVID.
It did. I don't think I could have stayed awake for it. I would have been like, what do you have to say, Carla? And then
We're digging deep into your dreams.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I'm glad you're back. I'm feeling better.
Yeah, I'm feeling so much better. It feels so good. Our first episode too was about how incapable you and I both are of small talk. So I wanted to let you know that I had a successful small talk conversation yesterday.
What?
I know.
This is so surprising.
It was surprising to me as well. I didn't start the conversation, but I participated. I was in yoga, and the girl next to me on the mat said, "There's a lot of people in here today." And I was like, yes, it's going to get really hot. That was about the extent of it. But I was so proud of myself. I was like,
small talk. You could have been like, what's your experience with a whole lot of people in one room?
Yes. Have you ever gone through a very difficult experience like yoga class that you'd like to tell me? I didn't go there. I just kept it light.
You did. How did it feel?
But I do have to tell you, it was awkward because we're in yoga. And so like, we're both laying down. So that's kind of like,
I didn't envision
for a conversation. It was like, we were like stargazing in a field together, So it just felt like a little bit strange to be like, well, now what do we talk about? And we didn't. We just laid there in silence for a good 10 minutes before the class started.
I
So
think small talk is awkward. I think
it's
if it's
so
awkward, you did it right.
oh, good. Okay, good. So, okay, it's supposed to
That's
be
what I
like
think. That's what I
have
think.
you had any small talk conversations?
Absolutely not. No. Even on the plane, going and coming back from Seattle, I had on a mask and I was just, I'm always on a plane, like, don't ask me what I do because I can't lie quickly and I don't want to hear about your problems. So, I put earbuds in from the beginning, and the mask just kind of helps me stay away from people. So that's basically what I did. The Uber drivers didn't even say anything to me. And I was like, this is great.
There's a setting on
It's
your
amazing.
phone, which I definitely have turned on in Uber, that's like low conversation, minimal conversation.
Really?
Yeah,
I
there
didn't
is.
know that.
And
Maybe
yeah.
I had that on.
Oh, yeah, right. Or they just
They didn't
know.
say anything. They
Yes.
didn't say anything at all.
No, I always appreciate it when people don't talk a lot on the plane, I have to say. And I also just feel like, I mean, all the therapists that are listening to will know that you don't want to say, I'm a therapist. Like, that's
You
not
know.
something, I've started to say, like, I'm an entrepreneur, like, I am the CEO of a startup, and people don't know what to do with it. They're like, nothing, no follow up.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I take out chief clinical officer. I just say that, I'm leadership of a tech company, and they're just like, I don't even want to talk to you. And I'm like, great, great.
I like that though, leadership
Yeah,
of a tech company. I'm going to steal that.
okay, you can have
Yeah.
it. I mean, you
Um,
are.
Yeah, well, yeah, we both are. Look at us wrapping up the small talk portion of our segment and into an important topic, microaggressions. This
Yeah,
is something that I think, you're specifically skilled at talking about because you have a lot of training, particularly in this area. I know you've invested a lot in your own like learning and training of understanding of all things, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, etc. So I'm just really excited to hear what you have to say about this
yeah.
and share my own thoughts as well. But maybe we could start with a bit of a foundation for people who are like, what's a microaggression again? Like, what does that even mean? What is it? Maybe also, what is it not?
Yeah. I think, that's definitely a good place to start to just kind of set the foundation of even why this is an important conversation to have and continuously have. One of the main parts of like conversations about social issues, injustice, equity, all of those things is that we have to constantly be having, these conversations. But so microaggressions are very subtle actions. They may even be like comments that are made that actually do convey, and the impact is like something derogatory or negative. It's kind of like a derogatory or negative message targeting marginalized people and marginalized groups. So I have an example actually from Instagram, one of my faves, and it is from Raven Sutton, who is she was a contestant on The Circle. I don't
I
know if
watched it. Oh,
people
I
watch. I
watched
mean,
both. Yeah, I've watched all this.
absolutely love. I love The Circle. I don't know if it's because I would like love to spend 2 weeks or however long they're in one room by themselves or like an apartment by themselves. That sounds glorious to me. But
I'm
anyways, too,
Should
yeah.
I submit you for that? Because I think you'd be really good at it.
I don't know. I don't know if Cameron would be happy with you if you submitted me to go away
I
for a
think you
week.
should take her. There's not been like a child on it yet.
There hasn't. Probably there's a reason, but I can find out. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. Sorry.
Go
Anyways,
ahead,
back
submit
to
us.
Raven.
Anyway, so on her Instagram, she was just kind of like talking. She was telling a story, and she was basically saying that one of the microaggressions that she faces is people coming up to her regularly and saying, "You're deaf? I cannot believe this. This is impossible. You speak so well."
Mm.
This is something that she kind of went into more explanation about this, but it's kind of like this backhanded compliment regarding a stereotype about people who are deaf, and that it's kind of like also minimizing her experience of being deaf, and even like minimizing it and like kind of putting it into a box of what she should be or shouldn't be able to do. So yeah, those are microaggressions in a nutshell.
Yeah, I thought she did such a great job on that show and represented the deaf community, like, really,
She
really
did.
powerfully. I think that was part of her intention in coming onto it. Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
just to say a few words about, deafness in general, like, my sister is an interpreter, an ASL, American Sign Language interpreter, so she's taught me a lot about, the deaf, community, and one of the things for them is that they don't see not hearing as a disability. It's a huge
Yeah.
part of their
Yeah.
identity in their
Yeah.
life. Most, this is her words. And so, I would love to hear, from an actual deaf person rather than just conveying this, but oftentimes they wouldn't even choose to be hearing if they could, because it is so much a part of their community and their identity and how they, you know,
Yeah.
interact with almost everybody in
Yeah.
their life. Yeah, I had a similar experience when I read the book that my sister also recommended called Sitting Pretty by Rebecca Tossig. She has a strong Instagram following as well, but she is in a wheelchair, and I think has been in a wheelchair since like the age of 2 from an illness, and
Hmm.
wrote this like
Hmm.
really incredible book about her experience and the fact that she didn't know that she was, different from other people until the world told her. Her parents at
Exactly.
her differently.
Yeah.
It was the world's view of her and their probing questions and the lack of
Hmm.
accessibility that she found in the world. She talked about just even going to the bathroom on an airplane and how that is like impossible, really, for someone
Yeah.
who lives their life from a wheelchair.
Yep.
Um,
Yes.
so yeah, this is such an important topic to talk about, I think, because they have such an impact. I wonder if maybe you want to share too, like what is the impact that microaggressions have on other humans?
Yeah, I think, microaggressions are, not very micro at all. So I think that it's very interesting that that's the term, but I think that it's because that it's subtle, right?
Mhm.
I think some of the definition, which I, purposely took out, was that it can be unintentional. And I think that unintentional is oftentimes a cop out that we need to continue to really be looking at microaggressions because we know that they exist. We know bias exists, and so anyway, some of the things that we need to look at really closely is that microaggressions are pervasive. They have a cumulative effect, and the impact really does show up in someone's mental and emotional
Mhm.
well-being. So I always think of as a therapist when I am just asking questions, that there are various ways that my language and the questions that I ask, especially if they are based in, a lack of understanding or lack of curiosity or stereotypes or my assumptions about people, that I could actually be communicating microaggressions that just add to trauma and cumulative, negative impacts. I think, the research tells us that constant exposure to microaggressions erode self-esteem. Like, just that word, eroding self-esteem, it creates feelings of alienation and contribute to stress and anxiety. They also reinforce stereotypes and perpetuate bias, and I think that all of these things further marginalize and stigmatize people who are already minoritized in society today. They kind of function as a subtle way for people to feel like they don't have a place to belong. And so, it further marginalizes people. I think, it hinders social progress for all of us, as well as, impeding efforts towards equality and inclusion. And I mean, I think, we talk about microaggressions in work environments, clinical environments, and I think that hostile, unwelcoming environment that, is created through microaggressions, that just perpetuates a, lack of belonging for people who really, really need it in order to do their best work.
Mhm.
And that's like, the long and the short of it. I am curious though, for you in your life, how have you come to have a deeper understanding of microaggressions over the
Yeah,
years?
this I appreciate this distinction of even just it's a specific term that I think people don't have a great understanding of, and they might just like loop it all in with some sort of like racial or social type of comment that is harmful to another person. But I think you really hit on something with talking about the fact that oftentimes it seems like you're not doing anything wrong, but it has an
Hmm.
impact on the other person. I think can think of a few examples that I've probably said at some point or another, like, to the person who I'm getting a pedicure from, like, your English is so good, or where are you
Mm-hmm.
from? Different things like that, that you would think my goal and intent is not to make them feel different, but really
Sure.
the impact of it is like what's important. And I really am saying by asking those questions, you're different, and
Right.
of course they're actually not that different. There's many people in the world who are from the same culture or the same orientation or identity or ability level that they are. I'm saying like you're different from me, and I'm pointing out like what that difference is. So I've
Yeah.
definitely been guilty of that many times. And I think a lot about the, phrase intent versus impact, which I'm sure many people have heard about before. And that the metaphor I've always heard for that is like, say you're on a subway with someone and you step on their foot, and hurt them, you can say, I didn't mean to. It wasn't my intent to hurt you. But that doesn't
Hmm.
help the person who's hurting at all, right? It's like there is an
Right.
impact that you had, their foot is hurting. That's the only thing that you should be speaking to is like, I have hurt you, not I didn't mean
Right.
to hurt you.
Yeah.
It wasn't my intention to hurt you. So that's some things
Sure.
I've learned about it. I don't know. How about you? Like how have you kind of evolved your thinking on this?
Yeah, I think that, to, some of the points that you were making, like, I think diversity and difference, the way that we, learn about its value is really important um, to understand, because if our intent is to make someone feel as though they're different than we are, if my intent to ask a question is to say you're different than me, explain how you're different than me,
Mm-hmm.
then that can be harmful. But if it's here is where I'm from, here is my lived experience, tell me a little bit about yours, then it's acknowledging that yes, we're different and both are valuable, but there's also some really great things that we can identify that are the same. I have been, I've been on the receiving end of microaggressions, and that was kind of like the first thought that came to my mind. I also, am someone who, fails at language and intent and impact as well, live in a world where stereotypes kind of like drive our assumptions and beliefs about people. But on the side of like being on the receiving end of sweeping generalizations through microaggressions, I've outright been called a diversity hire, by people in leadership who have hired me. I have been in conversations where we've talked about like that the requirement is to have X amount of Black people or women on staff, and it's kind of like, oh well, we got that in Carla, so let's kind of move on. Um, I think another thing that to me is the impact is that it's a microaggression is that I am constantly. I mean, this goes on today actually, in stores, and I'm approached as a person who like works there. Like I've been asked, to help somebody find something or to go get something, or like I could be with my daughter, I could be with other people, I could have things in my hand, but the assumption is that I am a worker versus a shopper. And I don't necessarily know where that comes from. I mean, I can make assumptions, and the impact is that's kind of like a lived experience. There's a lot of overlap, in talking to other people who are Black, other people who are marginalized, that there is this assumption that they are, serving or working. So it could be that, it could not. I'm not quite sure what the intent is there. But, I think my first example of being a diversity hire really does speak to, kind of the recent conversation around affirmative action, because I think that even just the conversation is an aggression. I would say a macroaggression. It's like, out in the open, it's intentional. The narrative change of what affirmative action did for people of color, especially Black people, I think, that shift is such a macroaggression, but I think that the ways that we language it are micro. But so I think that like many people are sad to see the Supreme Court ruling to end affirmative action, and ending it specifically on the basis of racial identity. So I'm wondering what impact you think this will have, and what has it had?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think many of these questions can just come back to like a personal experience of how you have seen this um, evidence of this in your own life. And it made me think about my mom who went to school. I was super proud of her. She went and got an English degree probably just like 10 years ago. She never finished college. And so she went back to get her degree. And I can remember when she was in school, her whole mind was opened in this really like new and exciting way. And it was because she had a very diverse classroom experience, which she was a part of as a non-traditional student and an older woman. Being able to kind of impart her experience, I think, was very edifying to other students. And she's learned a lot about all the other students in the classroom and really benefited from, their own lived experience and what they, how they were raised and all of those types of things. So when I thought about it, I saw this one quote from Michelle Obama that I thought was pretty powerful. And she said, she's talking on her Instagram account, and she said, it wasn't just the kids of color who benefited either. Every student who heard a perspective they might not have encountered, who had an assumption challenged, who had their minds and their hearts opened, gained a lot as well. So that sadness that you talk about, I think it's something that all of our society should feel and experience of. This is taking away from the experience of many different voices represented. And that has a direct impact on the learning experience, right? I mean, if you think about when people go to college, it's oftentimes their first time interacting with people outside of their own community or their own family. This is the time to have your thoughts and ideas challenged, to see the world through a bigger lens. Absolutely. And that's a benefit. It's a benefit that will stay with you for the rest of your life. It's a learning experience that my mom honestly wished she would have had sooner in her life, So I think that's kind of the thought that came to mind. But I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on like what's your perspective on the end of affirmative action?
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes a lot. One thing I will say is that, there are, colleges and universities and, organizations that have come out and said that they will continue to strive toward, having diversity in their student population or their employees. And I think, that is a really great sentiment. I think the hard part is that, it's been taken out of policy. Like it is no longer a requirement. And it's that requirement that I think has made, some pretty significant impacts. So to me and for me, affirmative action was, it was actually protection in policy that made it mandatory for racial and gender minorities to be visible in conversations, at tables, and in spaces where we would have systematically been left out. And I remember hearing Joy Ann Reid, who is a correspondent for MSNBC. I probably got that second one wrong. But, she's a correspondent, and she was basically talking about the fact that she was from this small, predominantly white town in Colorado, and that her being able to get into the school that she did was more so about visibility.
Mm-hmm.
It was about, not that, she wasn't the same as or better than her peers that she ended up going to college with. It was that it was like a requirement to be seen.
Mm.
And so without this requirement to be seen, there then is the option for invisibility again. And, that I think is the hurtful part. A lack of visibility and access is so sad, because I know that, diversity, difference of thought, difference of experience is so valuable and life changing for, anybody who experiences it. So without it, we're talking about more spaces, which there are plenty of them, for misunderstanding, for microaggressions, for bias to just like breed and grow. And it really is just perpetuating the incorrect narrative of what affirmative action was, or is. It's, just turned into this belief system that a person is not, that they actually are not qualified to be where they are, versus that their qualifications are now required to be, or were required to be seen. And so that change of narrative is absolutely a microaggression that impacts emotional well-being. It breeds imposter syndrome. It breeds this constant feeling of not being enough. And to be in like multiple spaces where that's the case on a day-to-day basis,
Mm-hmm.
it erodes self-esteem. Like that's the impact here. And this is the human, impact. And I just kind of think that the lack of protection, from sweeping discrimination for people of color is just, it's just a hard pill to swallow. And I think one positive thing, that I've really seen and experienced at Motivo that you really drive is that, we've been intentional about discussing political issues, as hard as it is, as thick as the climate is in doing so. So I think it's because it affects our lives, but also it affects the lives of, of people who are getting mental health services, associates and supervisees who are getting supervision, as well as supervisors who are kind of, building out their space in helping and mentoring a new generation of therapists. But there's also an element of social justice that is the foundation of our profession.
Mm-hmm.
So given this, how do you think about issues like microaggressions and bias as a clinician and supervisor?
Yeah, I want to answer that. I also want to go back to kind of some of the other points that you made that I thought were so strong.
Yeah.
Even just thinking about even some of the comments that we have already made as examples of microaggressions, I think it is important to notate that it's also because of how often and how much that happens, So I feel like your
Right.
Raven's experience, like one comment like that on her Instagram probably wouldn't faze her so much. Multiple
Sure.
comments over her life, always like pointing out the difference in her, or assuming that she wishes that her life was different in some way. Many,
Yeah.
many, many Black women being asked to help them find something in a supermarket. That is like not coincidence, right? That is like a
Right.
pattern that impacts people, that it's important for other people
Sure.
to know about so that we can respond and react differently. So I think
Mhm.
also the other thing that I wanted to mention was that I think that it's important for these things to be represented in our legislation as well, because as much as we want to hope that we as a society will do it because it's the right thing,
Exactly.
like we don't. Like that doesn't happen. Like I've always thought that in the same way about just, the idea of, food stamps or assistance, Medicaid, Medicare, all of those types of things, you would think like, oh, okay, the religious communities, the nonprofits, the non-government organizations, they'll take care of the people who are hurting. They don't. Like in large enough quantities
Yeah.
to solve the problem, right? So the
Right.
government has to
Yep.
step in my opinion, this is my opinion, that the government has to step in with some sort of social supports, or else these people, would fall through the cracks. I saw this all the time when I was working in Skid Row, of people who literally wouldn't have been able to survive without Medicaid or Medicare or some form of social security,
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's the responsibility part that I think is in such it's so controversial. However, I think that you're absolutely right when we say that, oh, we're just going to do it because it's the right thing to do. Well, not everybody agrees that it's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
and that's in such debate that all while people with the privilege to debate it are debating it, people are falling through the cracks and literally creating situations that are so hard for them to come back from, if at all.
Yeah. Oh man, I could say so much more about this, but I'm
Yes, so
gonna
much.
say, to your earlier question around the responsibility of us as a profession. Yes, this is why we have tried to be more vocal, you and I, about the fact that this isn't just a political issue. We have a responsibility as mental health clinicians to ensure that everybody has access to care, that we do our own work around our understanding of privilege and bias and microaggressions, because building relationships is foundational to our profession. I say this a lot, but like the number one change agent in therapy is the relationship between the therapist. I think back to the therapists that I have done my best work with were always the ones that made me feel safe. They intentionally created that safe spot for me, and I did my best work there. So all of us as clinicians and supervisors, we want the people in our care to get better, so if there's anything that we can do to make that a safer space for them, we want to do it. I'm not even going to say we should want to do it. I know we do want to do it. That's why we get into the profession to begin with. I came across on LinkedIn the other day this commencement speech. It was by Governor Pritzker, who is the governor of Illinois. And I thought it was like so interesting. It was talking about the fact that empathy is an evolved human emotion, that, if you just like look back into the history of like mankind, there was very much like a survival of the fittest mentality, like just the strongest survive or whatever. But he said, over time, like empathy became this emotion that we saw like was better for humanity, but that it doesn't come natural to us, that we have to like work at it. We have to like build empathy. And so, as we talk about some of the things of, I appreciate seeing examples in our society of us being more welcoming, more inclusive, more, cautious and responsible with our words, like that doesn't make me feel like I'm walking on eggshells. That makes me feel like I'm evolving as a human, and I think when I look back on even these episodes 5 years from now, I hope that I cringe a little bit of like, whoa, I don't think that anymore. Now I think this, because I certainly would look back 5 years. I mean, even when I watch TV now, I see rewatching like the New Girl series. There's microaggressions all over that. Like there are, it's like, and Friends, like there's so much of it that now I'm like more aware to, that I wasn't like when I was watching it 5-10 years ago, So I think it is, I always think about this story with my little niece, August, who, I'll just tell the real quick story because it's freaking adorable. But she was in my car once. I had picked her up from school, and we had gone to lunch, and she had said, what do you do for work again? And I was like, trying to figure out how to describe my job to her. And I was like, well, I own a company and I'm the boss. And she was like, boys can't, or boys are bosses, girls can't be bosses. Which was like so strange for her to say. Her principal is a woman, her assistant principal is a woman. She's seen many examples of women in career and leadership positions. And I was like, well, that's actually not true. Like, anybody can be a boss. A woman actually makes a great boss. And she just like got quiet, and her response was, thank you for teaching me that. And it was like the cutest thing ever. I was like, did you really just say that? She goes, thank you for teaching me that. And I just thought, like, that is what I want my response to be to any thing that I learn. That is, how can I be more inclusive? How can, our society be a safer space? How can we be more representative in our words and language? I'll do it all. And it is my work to do in terms of like learning what that is and paying attention, doing my own like work and reading around this issue. So thank you for teaching me. That is like a mantra that I have just carried with me. Yeah.
I love that.
I know.
August always teaches us some really great, amazing things.
She's so funny.
She just is a good teacher.
She is a really good teacher.
A lot of your nieces and nephews are.
To like just post videos of her, because she is, I think that sometimes when it's like the youngest, they are just so, the things they say are so interesting because they have such vocabulary
they say anything.
They say so much, right?
Yeah, and so much freedom from being the youngest that they're just like, I get to say anything and I have the words to say.
That's exactly right. She's got it. Yes. But I'm curious, like, maybe we can also talk a little bit about like repair, post microaggression repair. So what does that look like? We said the example earlier of being in the subway and, instead of saying, I didn't mean to hurt you, just saying, I'm sorry, I did hurt you, like, what does that repair look like? And is it possible, I guess?
Absolutely. This is one of the places where, I had a good bit of notes because I feel like for this conversation, it's personal in that I have experienced microaggressions, but I think also it's important for, me to also share that we all actually, commit, or we are also engaging in microaggressions and bias and stereotypes as well. And the cultural humility that you just talked about is actually what guides the entire process when it comes to repair.
We're losing Carla for a second. We'll see if we get her back. She'll be back. I'm positive. Oh, I want to hear what she has to say. Oh, Mike is commenting that I can talk to him in the meantime. Hi, Mike. Thank you for joining me here. I think we're going to cut to technical difficulties real quick and we can, oh, wait, she's back. Hi.
Am I back?
Yeah, I was just over here freaking out. It's just totally fine. Mike said I could talk to
Don't
him.
worry. I was actually over here freaking out too.
Yes.
I thought you just couldn't hear me.
Yes. No, you cut out like a minute into what you were saying, but like keep going because you had so many good things to say.
Okay, so I was basically saying that I was in a conversation with someone who identified as biracial, and just in, my ignorance, I was just kind of like having a conversation with her about something having to do with her identity. And I said, you're half and half. Like I just flippantly said this. And I feel like, even in saying it, I never really thought about the implications of identifying a person as half and half of something. But the look on her face when I said it didn't stop me in the moment, but I remember it distinctly. I can see it right now. It was like this pain. It was as if I had hit her, and because there was like a jolt, and
Mm.
she tensed up. She, continued the conversation. Her face dropped, and so it was just kind of like this, like really awkward situation. And so she walked away, and I was like, I wonder what just happened. And so I reflected on it, and I was able to identify right then and there, what would it be like for someone to reduce my identity to half and half of something? And
Mm.
this is something that we say all the time. We say somebody, who is multiracial or biracial, we say the percentages that they are. And so, I was like, it's definitely that. So I immediately, I went to her and I said, I am so sorry for what I just said. And I identified what I said. I said, of course, you are not half and half of anything. You, number one, you get to say how you identify and how you just what the descriptors are. But also, I noticed that what I said hurt you. And I am so sorry for that. And she actually said that there has never been anyone who has said that. She hears it often, and identified how hurtful that it was.
Mm.
And I take no, nothing, no credit in being able to identify it, because she actually is the one who communicated it. All I had to do was be paying attention to her. And this was just like a regular conversation. And so to answer the question, I think it is really important for us to like have this space of like, we have to recognize that what we say and what we think can always be wrong, especially when it's about somebody else.
Yep.
In fact, it will most likely be wrong. We probably don't know who they are. We probably don't know about their lived experience.
Mm.
Even if everybody else around us looks and we perceive them to be the same as that person, we absolutely have no idea. And so everything that we say and everything that we do and every assumption that we make about a person is probably false. It's probably not real. It's probably not true. It's probably wrong is mainly where I want to land. And that this biracial woman wholeheartedly is 100% Black, 100% Southeast Asian, and she's 100% her, with the agency to identify who she is and to tell me who she is. I don't get to tell her that at all.
Yep.
And in fact, I think it's important for us to like be insightful about that, so that not only are we not making assumptions in our head, but also that we don't operate from those assumptions. Don't say anything about who somebody is until you actually know. Ask them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a diversity training. So in every way was it part of the conversation for me to be able to like get that information from her before I assumed. So it's kind of just leading with cultural humility. It's this idea. This idea that we are going to be wrong. We're going to fail. We're going to say the wrong thing. So let's just expect that. And what do we do when we say the wrong thing? What do we do when we even knowingly say the wrong thing? We're usually faster to apologize when we know that we're going to say the wrong thing, and then we actually do.
Yeah.
So let's actually repair in the moment. Don't wait. I would have loved to send her an email, because just because of the fact that interpersonal conversation is hard, and then identifying that I did something wrong is even harder. But it can be life changing. It can actually impact a traumatic experience if we can just lean in and say, I was wrong. I'm sorry.
I love that. Yeah, I
Full
think that
stop.
is such a great example too. That story is so powerful of really what the governor was talking about around being willing to like learn how to be more empathetic. And I don't think any of us are there yet. These
Yeah.
stereotypes are around all of us. And, one of the things that I spoke about in my last Mondays with Motivo, I think it was the last, maybe the one before last, about the To Leslie or For Leslie, the movie that I watched on Netflix, where, there was a comment made. She's an alcoholic, and she was talking about her life and the choices that she had made. And the man that was speaking to her just said, things don't go the same way for any two people. And I just thought how powerful that is when it comes to stereotypes, that you don't know. Like,
Right.
you
I
can't
have no
make
idea.
these broad assumptions about anyone without really knowing it. And it makes me think back to our conversation with Mac a few weeks ago, when he talked about like leading with identifying your own or stating your own pronouns as a way to create safe space for the other
Yes.
person to share theirs. I just think that's it's really powerful and important work. And I love what you said there about identifying it in the moment. As I
Mhm.
have made similar hurtful comments, I want to repair it. And then I also want to ask myself the question, why did you assume that Black woman was at Target to help you?
Yeah.
What's there? Like, dig a little
What is
deeper
there?
personally into that and challenge why you might have thought that,
Sure.
and
Sure.
that's our work to do, right? Like, to
Hmm.
do the
Yeah.
repair, but then also to ask ourselves the very hard, uncomfortable questions, because nobody wants to identify as racist, like nobody
Sure.
wants that for themselves. So
Right.
they,
Right.
are immediately responding to that, like, oh, well, I didn't mean it that way. And it's like,
Right.
that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, right? It just matters
Doesn't
that
matter.
this
Yeah.
is something that is continuing to happen to a community of people, and you need to be more aware of it, is what I try to tell myself.
Yeah, I really love that. I also think that, there is such an internal process because we can choose not to say anything. We can choose to ignore that, we are operating within a stereotype or bias, or, our language was a microaggression. Our behavior was, a microaggression. We can choose to ignore that. Or the other option is that we can, come to grips with the fact that, yes, we do. Human being, yes, you operate from biases. Yes, you're going to language these biases and these stereotypes, maybe even every single day.
Yeah.
So be on the lookout for it.
Hmm.
And if you're more so like, no, I didn't do that because I'm not ableist, or I'm not rendering this person invisible, that's defensiveness. So you're defending against yourself. No one has said it. A lot of times people who are experiencing microaggressions, they've experienced it before. They've heard it before. So
Hmm.
they've stopped saying, that was hurtful, or what you said was hurtful, because most often we're met with, that wasn't my intention.
Yep.
And so when that happens, we're kind of like fighting with ourselves to come to terms with the fact that we did something wrong and
Yeah.
we hurt somebody.
Hmm.
That's like that. I mean, if you hurt somebody and your intention is not to hurt somebody, if you have a core value not to hurt somebody and you did, then that means that you have to repair it.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, that makes me think about like why the kind of name change between cultural, what's the word?
Sensitivity.
Cultural sensitivity into cultural humility, is that it's like,
Yeah.
it's humbling to
Yeah.
stop and acknowledge something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to,
Yeah.
especially, as a provider of a
Yes,
human service,
that's right.
we have to do
We, yeah. We should, I hate using the word should, but like, we should be doing this better than anybody, right? It's part of our profession
that.
to
Right.
be able to learn these skills. Quick story, before we end, that I remember reading in the book, Saving Psychotherapy. It's one of my favorite books, from Dr. Ben Caldwell. And he was talking about, he
Hmm.
was at this like conference, Marsha Linehan, who's like the founder and creator of dialectical behavioral therapy, you know this, was speaking, and the mic wasn't working very well. So she was very like low and couldn't really hear her. And everybody was kind of straining to hear. And then this one clinician in the audience was like opening this candy wrapper super, super, super loudly. It was like so loud. It was so disruptive. And all the clinicians around her were like giving her the stink eye, like, how dare she? This is so disruptive. And Dr. Caldwell was just like, hi, I don't think you realize how loud that is. And she was like immediately like, oh my goodness, like I need to fix this. But he was like, how odd is it that we're in a group of like mental health professionals who have master's degree in healthy communication, and nobody can just like lean over and be like, pardon me. Like, so I think this is a good, important conversation for clinicians to be having, because it's vital to our work.
Vital. It is the work.
It is the work. Oh,
like,
good.
How are we, not moving into all of the places where anxiety exists, for example, and also, repairing it through having a different exchange. Sometimes we're the only person that this client encounters that is encountering them differently than everybody else.
So powerful. Yeah, you're right.
We got to do it.
That's right.
We should do it. I say you should.
We're going to say should.
Tee up next week for us.
Yes. Okay. It's going to be a doozy. I don't know if I'm ready for it, but I want to talk about like trauma responses. And I think this like actually dovetails a little nicely off of this conversation, because the accumulation of microaggressions, or just one by itself, can lead to forms of trauma for people, and showing up differently in the world because of what has happened to them and harm that has been done. I have myself experienced some of my own trauma and often get triggered, and so we want to talk a little bit about what does a trauma response look like and feel like, how to navigate that in the moment, and then after, what is a trauma response telling you about unresolved pain, or resolved pain that's coming back up, right? Because it will continually do that. So, we don't talk about the light topics, like, yoga classes.
We chose digging deep. So
we did.
We kind of have to. We have to. But I think that, it is really important. Also because I think that, as providers, we are assumed to not be triggered, or to not have, to be traumatized in the work that we do. So, I think, at least in my work, these conversations have already helped. So, looking forward to next week, even though it's a doozy. I just want to mention as we wrap up that we are on Apple Podcasts. We are also on Spotify and Stitcher. You can also get the video of this episode on YouTube, and we are excited to have people who are watching live, but then also who are streaming later on. So come one, come all.
I love that.
Can't wait to see you next week.
Yeah, same. Always. It's so good to be here. All right. Thanks. See you soon.
Okay. All right. Bye.